Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have two heavy hitters here today, two fan favorites, because they talk about the things that very many of you, most of you, I would say all of you, like myself, are strongly interested in. These two gentlemen have come together, Dr. Dan Schneider, Jesse Romero, and have written a new book. It is the Spiritual Warfare Question and Answers. And I'm so excited because I get a lot of questions from my own people, and I don't feel I'm halfway as qualified to answer these questions as these two gentlemen are, who have both in some way, indirectly or directly, taken part in exorcism. So they have been there when the priests, together with their prayers, have defeated Satan. And so today I bring to you Jesse Romero, Dr. Dan Schneider, and I'm so excited to talk about this new book. Gentlemen, welcome to Breakfast with Bacon. Forget all the pleasantries. Why on earth did you decide to do this book and to team up? What a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for having us. Jesse and I have been talking about this for a long time. And since we first reconnected, what, 8, 9 years ago,
2019, we
I
reconnected.
think 6 years ago. Yeah. So we were talking about we get so many emails from, and our various platforms from people asking questions about spiritual warfare. Should I go to what's wrong with horror movies to Freemasonry to everything in between, curses, Chucky dolls. And so we just assembled them all. I had them in a file, and I was working on the follow-up book to the Liber Christo, the manual. And Jess says, "Hey man, let's squeeze this one in." So I stopped and I started working on that, and we put this together again just to kind of answer a lot of those questions. Because there's just a lot of confusion. At first, I wasn't crazy about the concept. I was like, Q&A, I'm not sure about that concept. And Jesse wanted to do the old Catholic radio replies, spiritual warfare edition, but there's not a real clarity on who owns that title, so we went with the spiritual warfare Q&A. But that's basic concept, questions that come into us through because of the work that we do on Virgin Most Powerful and the War College.
Which questions?
Chris,
So when go ahead,
let
Jesse.
me just jump in. I'll tell you what got me started on the entire spiritual warfare, you know, track of Catholicism is I've never mentioned this. I've never written about it. You're probably going to be the first podcast other than mine that I've mentioned this. I had a brother who was possessed from the age of 19 to 21. He's still alive, so I don't go into a lot of detail, but there was a Catholic priest from Los Angeles, rest in peace. He's passed away now. He came to my mom and dad's house for about 2.5 years, prayed for him, over him, the rite of exorcism, probably about 50 to 60 times. It was me and my siblings. The priest assigned us to hold him down. My mom and dad were there. I think an aunt, an uncle were there, but my other brothers and my sister, we witnessed this for about 2.5 years. So I never forgot that. Shortly after that, I became a cop, graduated from the Sheriff's Academy, and they put me in a section of the county jail where for 6 months, my job was to babysit serial killers, mass murderers, psychopaths, and sociopaths. And I had long conversations with many serial killers because all you do is you're just you're outside the cell from them for 8 hours a day for months, if not years, feeding them 3 times a day, giving them a magazine, taking them to the yard to do push-ups and sit-ups. So you get to know these guys. I mean, they're not your friends, obviously, but they start asking you questions. You ask them questions. So I had long conversations with a very famous serial killer called the Night Stalker, who was perfectly possessed. And that's where I started seeing that all of what happened to my brother, subsequently my stint in the county jail as a rookie deputy sheriff, and these long conversations with Richard Ramirez. This one I said, all this is absolutely true, and I have to learn it as best as possible as a Catholic.
A little side note, what does perfectly possessed mean?
Okay, that's a term that I'm borrowing from Father Malachi Martin back in the 60s. That's a term that he would use. I know Dad would probably use a different term, but perfect possession, according to Father Malachi Martin, he would say that that's a person who they make a pact with the devil, and then they perfectly align their will with that of a demon or demons or the devil. And so the demon and the person they're completely, they're friends, they're buddies, or as Dan would say, and Kyle, they have psychological compatibility with each other. So this person that's perfectly possessed, like a politician, for example, a judge, a chief of police, they're not going to manifest because they're in perfect harmony with the demon that they've made a pact with, that they've invited, that they've opened the door to. And so you're not going to see them, convulse or their eyes roll back. They could even walk into a Catholic church. They could even receive Holy Communion, and the demon will not manifest because there's a symbiotic relationship between that person and the demon. Dan, you want to jump in and clean it
Yeah,
up?
so the difference is it's either contested or uncontested. In the perfect possession, they've surrendered their will. The demon, technically speaking, only possesses the body of the person. This is why Father Gabriel Moore says that one good confession is worth 100 exorcisms. But and so we focus a lot on exorcism, but it's really living in the state of grace is key. So what happens is, like in the case of Jesse's brother, that whatever affliction, however the opening was, that was contested by him and the family. In the case of what Father Malachi Martins calls a perfect possession, it's no longer contested. There's a lot of people that are possessed by a demon that are just they're not contesting it because they're enjoying the benefits of it. There's this complete simpatico, if you will, a complete surrender of the person to the demon in exchange for various gifts, power, prestige, money, etc.
I just keep thinking, I'm a big fan of baseball, right? And I love Bob Uecker. If anybody's into baseball, they know who he is. And just yesterday on the Milwaukee Brewers, they celebrated his life. But I remember when he died in January, just such a good, funny man. I remember saying, well, now you've met your maker. I hope to find you in heaven. All these questions that you had, none of the benefits, as you said, that we get on earth matter if we don't use them right, to get to eternity. So I don't want to stay distracted off of this topic too much, because you two are just rich with information. So when I read I haven't gotten the book yet because it comes out tomorrow, from when we're recording this. It's when you can get it. And again, the title is called Spiritual Warfare Q&A. It said it had people would write in questions. And so you said dozens and dozens of questions about exorcism, occult, magic, horror films, as you said. You made me laugh, and you said Chucky doll, yoga. Yoga's the one that gets me. So what was the number one question or topic or area that person after person after person kept hitting you guys with?
I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you mine. I think
Yeah.
for me, and then I'll let Dan answer. I think the question I get asked most of all is probably yoga, number one. I think the second question I get asked about is, why do demons hate Gregorian chant? What's the power? That's another question that comes up quite often. And a third one that comes up often is basically, how do we self-deliver? Is there such a thing as self-deliverance? And how can I, start freeing myself and liberating myself from this diabolical affliction? Dan, what are the questions you get?
Yeah, I get very similar ones. Mine are often more because they're coming in through our webpage, Liber Christo. We get how do I find a priest in my area? How can I drive this demon out? I have a spouse, a father, a mother, a child that is afflicted. How do I self-liberate? What prayer regimen do I need to pray to find some liberation? That's a big one. Again, we get a lot of questions now, again, on yoga, Harry Potter, horror movies. Why are these bad? And Santa Muerte, Freemasonry. So we get just a lot of just questions that are like, talk about Bob Uecker. They're just like going batting practice, and you've got a pitching machine that the ball is just coming in at you at all different speeds and heights and depths. So, and that's what I think we estimate we're getting something like, I don't know, 300-400 questions a week or coming in. So we decided, well, let's just put them in a book and handle some of those things. And we get and one of the things that I get that I really wanted to put into the book, and Jesse does as well, but we get a lot of questions from priests that have a lot. They don't learn this. Whenever I train priests at various dioceses or assemblies or whatever, the overwhelming answer, the overall comment that I get is, gee, I could have used this information 25 years ago. They're just not getting angelology. They're not getting that kind of Christian cosmology, spiritual warfare. These are just not topics that are really covered. So questions coming from priests, how do priests use their priestly dignity? And what is the difference between, there's a big difference, Jess, between how you work as a cop versus the chief or the investigator. You work differently. An officer fights a battle differently than the enlisted guy. The commander of a Navy ship it battles differently than the guy that's manning the gun. And so there's a big difference between how the lay people do battle in spiritual combat and how priests do battle. And we're blurring those lines. And this one of the what I've tried to do, we've tried to do in this book is kind of unblur those lines to kind of show the distinction between the two priesthoods. Because once you can separate out the universal priesthood of the laity and the sacerdotal priesthood of the ordained, you can separate those out within the authority structure. You can understand, okay, God has put you in this place, in this lane, in this orientation, in the mystical body, and now do battle from that positionality. And this is what the questions come in. We try to bring it back to that, and also again address a lot of the questions that come in from priest. How can priest use this spiritual combat as just the normal exercising of the sacerdotal ministry? Jesse, you see the email we got from a priest last week, said it changed. He read the book. I sent him a copy, and it changed his. It just blew him away. He loved it. It's understanding spiritual combat, and utilizing it in as a priest has changed his interaction with his parishioners, has changed his priesthood, it's invigorated him as a priest of the living God. And so it's not just for lay people. It is, like the title says, priest and laity.
I would also say that, Christine, every single priest that I've talked to has told me that post 1965, there's not one seminary that teaches spiritual warfare, angelology, demonology. And so, like Dan said, it's the priests that do know about this is because they've studied on their own. But I've even heard Monsignor Rossetti, who was the exorcist for the Diocese of Washington. He said on stage at a conference that I was with him, he says, not one seminary on planet Earth post 1965 teaches anything about exorcism, deliverance, spiritual warfare, angelology, demonology. And he's not I've heard dozens of the most well-respected priests in the world say the same thing.
It's just so sad. So sad. Okay, let's go to some of the ones that I want. And it's the one that you two both mentioned, and it was number one to me, so let's hit it. Yoga. I have so many people calling me religious radical. Come on, give me a break. I'm just getting exercise. What's up with yoga?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so I was talking with John Henry Weston at LifeSite, and he says that there's certain articles they run that they get instant negative feedback. The number one is anything they do on homosexuality and gay marriage. Number two is yoga, and number three is Harry Potter. And so this is like where Jesse and I win friends and influence people. We do Q&As at conferences. The yoga comes up, Harry Potter comes up, tattoos is a growing topic.
Oh, that's another one. Yeah.
These are the hey, don't shoot the messenger. I'm in sales, not management. But yoga is one. Remember, it goes back to this is a question we cover in the book. It goes back to even I bring in the quote from St. Augustine: anima forma corporis, the soul forms the body. So the things that we do in our body have spiritual significance. And so so with yoga, there's no way certain things, and even the yogi will tell you, there's no separating out the spiritual from the bodily. There's no separation out the spiritual meaning. You go to the plate to play baseball, and you make this gesture with your hands and make the sign of the cross. There is just no way to separate out, whether you believe it or not, there's no way to separate out that gesture. And so when you're doing yoga, you're using your body and you're invoking with the body, you're invoking the various deities of the pantheistic religion of Hinduism. And so we know from Psalm 96:5 and Deuteronomy 32, I think verse 15, the gods of the Gentiles are demons. And so you're invoking an exterior energy. You can call it an energy, but you're invoking not just an energy, but an entity into your body by that bodily form. Jesse's a former law enforcement officer. You know, if I walk down the street in certain parts of Los Angeles and I do certain bodily gestures with my hands, or I wear certain colors, I'm invoking something, whether I intend it or not. I might just get a beat down for that. So the spiritual realm works in the same way. We are embodied souls. We are embodied spirit, and so it's a body soul composite. And so the things that we do in our body uh, have a religious meaning, particularly in the context of yoga. And so one of the things that I've seen working with cases, I'm not sure if Jesse, you've seen this as well,
Yeah.
but you'll see a manifestation. When a manifestation, what we mean by manifestation is the body, the demon appropriates the senses. Remember, I said earlier, the demon only technically possesses the body, but you can surrender the intellect and the will, the higher faculties, which are sovereign. During a diabolic manifestation, the demon manifests or appropriates the bodily senses. And when that entry point has been the use of yoga, then oftentimes we've seen that the bodily manifestation, the demon takes the form now of the yoga position that the person was doing. That doesn't prove that yoga is wrong, but it's an indicator to make you go, whoa, 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 why is this wrong? And so there's many other forms of exercise and that you can do, prayer that you can do that as Catholics we should be doing, and not trying to baptize something that is completely unbaptizable.
Let me
That's
just mention
important.
one more thing.
Okay. And I want to mention real quick, because I'm sure yours is more brilliant than mine, but my PhD is in communication. And 93% of our communication is done non-verbally. The tone of voice, the eye
Yeah.
contact, the physical posture, your gestures, so on and so forth. And so that just aligns, of course, the truth of the gospel is always in line with what can be proven scientifically and things, because if it's good science, it's going to back up what God
Well,
has taught.
Christine, you walk by, you're a female, you understand this. You would walk, the quintessential, you walk by the construction site, and there's a couple of construction workers sitting there eating their lunch, and one of them whistles at you,
Yeah.
right? And if you ignore it confidently and keep walking, he waits and finds somebody else. But if you look back and you make eye contact with that guy, he's going to put down his sandwich and he's going to run over and talk to you because you've just given him a nonverbal permission. Remember, the demon has no rights to the soul, but he will take permissions. And so you're absolutely right. We communicate nonverbally.
Yeah.
And the demon's watching for those cues. And when you put your body in that non-verbal, but nonetheless bodily position in certain, not accidentally, but intentionally through yoga, there is no separating that out. Jess, what were you were going to
Yeah,
add?
here's one little point that I just wanted to add is that uh, Hindus, they believe in millions of gods. They're polytheist. And so yogis actually teach, and they're this online, you can hear their classes where they teach this. They say that Hinduism is a religion and that yoga is part of the religion. You can't separate the physical exercises and mantras from the religion. That's not Jess Romero or Dan saying it. This is yogis saying it, that yoga is part and parcel of the religious system. Now, they teach in yoga that the positions that they teach you is meant to awaken a snake that everybody has on their back. So in Hinduism, they teach that the spinal cord is a dormant snake. Well, we all know in Christianity what a snake means in the Bible, in Genesis 3:15 and Revelation 12. So the yogic positions are meant to awaken. They call it the Kundalini snake. And that snake awakens in your back and it starts going around your body and touching different, what they call chakras, healing points in your body. This is either superstitious, or B, this is either occultic. Okay, this is not sacramental. This is not Christian. If there's any powers that this snake is touching in your body to provide some type of relief or healing, this has to be diabolic. There is nothing consistent with that practice and that philosophy in Christianity.
So last question on yoga. I had a girlfriend, she had a Groupon about 10 years ago for free, and I had never done yoga before, so I went with her for a week. I've since been to confession a million times. I've never confessed it. Is that a sin? Do you need to confess it?
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
I would confess it as a violation of the first commandment, even if you did it unknowingly.
Unknowingly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. If you've gone and stepped on unholy ground, if you've done some of the things you did this in total ignorance, just confess it, uh, do the penance for it, and move on. Don't dwell on it. Don't think twice, because there's a lot of stuff that we've all done, that we didn't know in our ignorance. And so if you've done that, just confess it and move on.
I'm gonna
Don't
hit
get
some of my topics before I let you tell me what was your favorite question to answer. So I hadn't even thought about it, but both my daughters loved Harry Potter.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
I,
That,
Jess, you want to go first? Again,
yeah.
we're hitting all the
You
fun
said
topics.
it, so I'm gonna hit the
Win
ones I'm like,
friends and
yeah,
influence people by Jess and Dan. Yeah.
or make them hate us, right?
Yeah.
Stop
Well,
spreading truth.
I'll do this. I'll start Jess, and then I'll give it back to Jess. Pope,
okay.
back when Cardinal Ratzinger was Cardinal Ratzinger before he became Pope Benedict, he was prefect for the doctrine of faith. He says to beware of Harry Potter's seductive, the subtle seduction is the word he used. And so my biggest beef with Harry Potter, now there's others that have gone deep in some of the other aspects. It's that, and I think Benedict was spot on, or Ratzinger, the subtle seduction at the age where a child is most open to to the
Influence.
vocation, to the other, to the spiritual life, that void that is man is created, as Augustine says, our hearts are restless and they rest only in thee. At that age where they're still pure, where they're open to the supernatural. We all have stories of children that are seeing angels that we were like, what are you talking about? Who was the lady that came in and visited me last night? What lady? You know, the lady with the roses. You know, we've all heard these stories from good Catholics that have had these. So when the child is most open to the other, to the supernatural, they're reaching sacramental age where grace is coming in, where vocations are heard, like Therese, the little flower. At that ripe, perfect age, society comes in with this pseudo spirituality, this false spirituality, under the guise of good versus evil, right? But you don't have good versus evil in Harry Potter. You have white magic versus black magic, and that's not good versus evil. As Father Amor says, all magic is a form of superstition and has recourse to Satan. So you're exalting rebellion by children, white magic, dark magic, and at a time when a child is most open to receive and be open to God and open to vocation, and grow in their spiritual life. And so to me, that's the subtle seduction of Harry Potter that Benedict mentioned. Jess?
I would also say that Catholics, they've lost the ability to discern the clean from the unclean. Years ago, I remember 60s, 70s, probably 80s, guys that wanted to watch pornography, they walked to the liquor store, they purchased their magazine, Playboy, Penthouse Hustler, they put it in a brown paper bag, because there was shame. There was still
Yep.
shame. And so they
Now there is
walk home
none.
with their little magazine in the brown paper bag. Well, now it's just a click away. And so the point that I'm making is that now many people, they've lost the ability to see that witchcraft, casting spells, sorcery, wizardry, white magic, black magic. Many Catholics have lost their ability to see that this is a grave offense against God. The Catechism is very clear. Paragraph 21, 13, 21, 14, 21, 15, divination, superstition, the occult. All of it references Deuteronomy chapter 18, the world of the occult, the dark arts. This is what Harry Potter promotes. And you also have one of the things that's constantly denounced in the Old Testament is witchcraft. And this is exactly what's being promoted, this school of wizards and the school of witches in the Harry Potter series. Now, again, you have some giants like Cardinal Ratzinger, Father Gabriel Amorth, that say specifically, Father Amorth, when he was around, rest in peace, he says behind Harry Potter hides the signature of Satan, the king of darkness. Cardinal Ratzinger he says he opposes Harry Potter novels. He says because it's and he started complimenting Gabriel Kubi, who was a German critic of Harry Potter. Cardinal Ratzinger says, or Pope Benedict XVI says, it is good that you, Gabriel Kubi, enlighten people about Harry Potter, because those are subtle seductions which act unnoticed, and by this deeply distort Christianity in the soul before it can grow properly. There are many priests that I respect. Father Daniel Calloway speaks out against the Harry Potter books. Father Dave Nix, somebody who doesn't have a filter in his mouth, also speaks against the Harry Potter books, not allowing your kids to read it. Father Isaac Relier, another priest, he's the one that actually trained Father Ripperger in the rite of exorcism. Father Isaac Relier. You got Father Vince Lampert, the exorcist from back east somewhere. Father Dan Rehill, the exorcist from Tennessee. Father Pedro Mendoza, the chief exorcist of the Diocese of Mexico City. Father Ripperger. Everybody that's involved in the field of exorcism sees the dangers of this book. And by the way, there's also good evidence, many people have written about this, that that the author of the Harry Potter books, I forget her name, J.K. Rowling's, that she did this through automatic writing. That's another topic in itself.
Yeah, you just got me thinking, what's automatic writing? But we'll do that another time, right? So yeah, people are constantly asking these, and I'm not educated enough to answer, but I'm like, just don't do it, so I'm glad that they can watch this podcast, but more importantly, read the book, because then we can have it right in front of us and go, look, page 88, here's what it says. So I think this is going to be important for people, because they're like me. I have a PhD and I don't feel educated enough to answer these questions when people ask me. So I do think that this book, the books you guys write are always my favorites. Jesse, I've told that to you 1,000 times. Every time you write a new book, I'm like, I'm going to get a copy of that one, which I do have a stack right here. So I think that's what we as the laity needs to do. This book is just huge. It should be right next to our Bible, saying, here's the answers. Here's why the Bible says what it says. Here's why the church says what it does. Anyway, I'm trying to make this the meatiest conversation possible without, so less of me, more of you. I'm just going to ask the ones that I have questions on. Horror films. I'm going to ask horror films. I'm going to ask tattoos, and then I'm going to let you guys tell me which ones that you really want to answer the most, because these are really appropriate to our current culture. What's up with horror films? I can understand why myself, but I want to hear.
So it ties back into, again, the human person, our understanding of how we put images together, images in the imagination. As Father Ripperger states, and again, he's got his PhD is in Thomistic psychology, and so according to the human person, according to the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas. And so you've got the higher faculties of the intellect and the will, you've got the lower faculties of the desires and the instincts, but then you have this intermediary factory where you've got the memory and the imagination. So embedded in there, this is where the battle takes place. We're all old enough to remember the phrase when computers came out, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And so what goes in, if you put good stuff in, you get good stuff out. You put garbage in, you get garbage out. So so the demon has access to what Father Ripperger refers to as the data set in the imagination. And so when you're putting into the imagination images, not to mention the fact that these movies are glorifying evil, these movies are desensitizing us to evil. You hear all this push from the Hollywood left saying, "Oh, we got to get rid of guns," until you turn on John Wick or you turn on these various movies, and we got to stop all the violence in culture, but we're glorifying it, and so you're glorifying evil, and you're not only that, you're putting into the imagination, into the data set of your imagination. Your images are different than mine. My images are different than Jesse. The demon works with our own culture, our own memories, our own imagination. And this isn't Dan making this up, Jesse making this up. This is in De Doctrina of St. Augustine. St. Augustine wrote about how the enemy uses our own culture, our own images to distort and to move from sign to signified. And so if you are constantly inundated in your mind with pornography, your world will be skewed with you won't be able to separate your interaction from disordered sexuality. And with horror movies, it's the same thing, that you now have just put into your mind not only the glorification of evil, but images that the demon has access to start manipulating against you. And so being pure of purity of thought, word, and deed is key to spiritual combat. This is why in our protocol, the Liber Christo protocol, there's a total media fast to flush out all those images and focus only on prayer, meditating on today's scripture, today's reading of script, today's mass readings. And so you're pushing out those images, you're purifying all those mental images through prayer and meditation, of that has been deeply embedded and giving less things for the enemy to work against and use against you in the spiritual battle, which is an interior battle.
Let me just make my response quick. There's an old principle in Catholicism. It's called custody of the eyes. Simple. Just because you got eyeballs doesn't mean you should watch everything that's out in front of you.
Yeah.
And our Lord Jesus Christ says it very clearly. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is sound, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is not sound, your body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? The point of this passage is custody of the eyes. Much of our lifestyle is determined by how we use our eyes. And so St. John Vianney also warned, and I'll make it short. He said, we must watch over our mind, our hearts, and our senses, for these are the gates by which the devil enters in.
Wow, absolutely true. This sounds so far off the topic, but I have this habit of counting things. I was a really good teacher, and I taught my kids, if you walk downstairs, I'm counting the stairs. I go to church, I count how many people are at the 6 o'clock mass, how many people are, and I know about how many are going to be at 6 o'clock. I know how many are going to be at 8 o'clock, and yet I count, right? And so the Lord's been saying custody of your mind, self-discipline, and it begins with the small things. So after communion, instead of counting, I would find myself counting how many people at the Novus Ordo were wearing veils, or how many people were kneeling, and not for judgment, just like, oh, okay, we're getting more and more people doing the, and just recently, Lord's like, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Then you won't be tempted to count the people. There's no sin in counting. There's no sin, but it was a distraction. And so it is so, because I think most of the viewers here for my channel are probably like, yeah, I'm not reading Harry Potter. I'm not doing these things. But it is absolutely these small doorways of how Satan will distract us through other nominal things. And that was really something the Holy Spirit pressed on me recently. It's like, yeah, take custody of your eyes, Christine. Stop counting and be not distracted right after communion when you should be focusing on me.
Right.
So it's important that you said
And custody of the eyes is the first step. It's the exterior, and then custody of the imagination, custody of the mind. And that's, you have to get custody of the eyes first, but you could have complete custody of the eyes and not custody of the mind. And so that's the critical movement. We have to start with the eyes. So close your eyes and then learn to control your interior life. And that's only going to happen through a discipline and through prayer.
Yep. And I saw how it was a hindrance. My last question, then I'm going to ask you guys, which was your favorite question to answer. But it was Freemasonry, because I have a neighbor here who's got Freemason symbol tattooed on his leg. And I tried to talk to him about, that's demonic. No, it's not. I've been a Mason for all these years. You have no idea. They've never told me not to love Jesus and blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, yeah. And this is a big one, because I think most of us who are really kind of in the church, most of us know this, but we don't exactly know how to articulate why. What does Freemasonry have to do with Satan and the demonic, and what do we need spiritual warfare in that area? That's a huge question.
Yeah, Freemasonry has been something that has been consistently denounced by nearly every pope for the last 200 years. There's been I think 20 some documents that have been put out. I cite in here a priest that put out a good little treatise that's on the internet, on public domain, that you can look it up as well, on what's wrong with Freemasonry. It's completely incompatible with Catholicism. The ultimate goal, or the ultimate mantra, if you will, of Freemasonry is against cross and crown. At some point during the ceremony, during the progression, upward and in through the Freemasonic ranks is a ceremony where you trample on a papal tiara representing rejection of the church's authority on earth. And so Freemasonry is not satanic as much as it's Luciferian. It's secular humanist and Luciferian, and it's in all forms, and it's a blending. It's syncretistic in many levels. So at a minimal level, yeah, you can worship Jesus if you want, and you can also worship Buddha if you want, and you can stay Baha'i if you want, because what matters is this secular humanist commonality of humanity. And so the lower ranks of the Freemasonry are going to be, they walk you through. Once you get to the third degree, of the 30, the master mason level, then you start to be recruited into different levels. And so normally what they'll do is to recruit somebody, they'll say, hey, you're an upstanding guy, you're an upstanding citizen, you got a good moral compass, and you got a good reputation. So you need a brotherhood, and they fill this natural need for brotherhood. This is why the Knights of Columbus were formed, to counteract and work against and give an opportunity for Catholic men not to get pulled out and have the brotherhood that they need. This is why the Knights of Columbus were come about for many reasons, in many ways. And so what happens is you're recruited because you're a man of good character. And then along the way, they'll ask you to do something that's a violation of that. They'll ask you, to do something immoral. We're going to have this meeting, and we can get you this contract over at the military base because you're a painting contractor. But if you don't mind, we're going to meet over at the strip club because that's where sometimes you have these meetings. And if you say no, hey man, you know what? I'm just here for the fellowship, and that's not for me. I'd like to just meet. Can we meet in my office? Sure, no problem. You're the guy that's standing there with the boot. You're the guy that's the face. This is just a public organization doing good works for people. If you say yes, they say, oh, okay. Then they see you were recruited because you were a man of good character and a man of integrity, but you're willing you're willing to do something immoral against that. And that's the guy that goes, okay, we'll meet over there. And that's the one that can progress through. And so this has been reported publicly. And there's going to be people that say, oh, no, that was a fake. It's been documented, that once you reach a certain level, the great architect of the universe is Lucifer. This is why this is not satanic. Satanic is more ritualistic. It's different than Luciferian. This is a Luciferian construct and organization through and through. And for this reason, several popes and multiple times has denounced Freemasonry as incompatible, and it brings about an automatic excommunication for joining. Jess.
Yeah, there's the 19th century Freemason that he considered himself the high priest of Freemasonry. You could watch him on the internet and even read this on Freemasonic journals. His name is Albert Pike. He died in 1891. In the speech that he gave, which is documented in the English Journal of the Freemasons, page 588, here's what he says, quote, yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately, Adonai is also God. Religious philosophy in its purity and truth consists in the belief in Lucifer, who is the equal of Adonai. But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. Okay? This is revealed to you. Now, this is not me talking. This information, like Dan said, it is revealed to every Freemason I've read at the 30th, 31st, 32nd, and 33rd degree. They tell you, by the way, this great architect that we've been invoking at the club every time we get together, this great architect is Lucifer. And you say, what? I'm a Catholic. I can't be invoking and praying to Lucifer. Well, guess what? You're in the good old boys club now. You reach the highest echelons of Freemasonry. Your businesses are tied into the lodge. Your wife's friends are tied into the lodge. Your social business contacts are tied into the lodge. If you don't continue coming to the lodge and invoking Lucifer, the great architect, we will destroy your social, personal, and family life.
And this is where your integrity has to come in, and it's going to judge a man from a boy.
Yep.
The devil looks for the mouth that blesses and curses, Christine. If that inconsistency, that's what he's looking for. That's a pattern break. That's how he can identify somebody that he can work with. Are you consistently Catholic in thought, word, and deed?
So I haven't read the book, obviously, because it's coming out tomorrow, excitedly. Is it written in a format that this is what the problem is, and then here's the solution, here's how to fight against it? I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's written just Q&A format, so it's kind of direct. Some answers are short, some are long, some more where there was needed to be theological precision, we put theological precision. Where it was based on experience, we give based on experience. But we try to give precise, clear answers to the various questions that came in. Five
But I'm
chapters.
saying, is it just what to know, or in addition to here's now why you know
Yeah.
tattoos are
Yeah,
bad, here's what you can do about it? It doesn't
Yeah,
have
we,
that
we
element.
give action items.
The
Okay.
action items is an appendix with the how to break Freemasonic curses, which we use in the field for people that are afflicted, and we've seen the effect of those curses in the field. I'll just give you an example, and I give some stories, and we put some stories in there too as kind of examples. We had a guy who was working closely with his priest and in the field of deliverance and exorcism, and they were doing the Freemasonic renunciations for one of the cases that came in. This guy is a successful guy, he's a deacon, he's a trustworthy guy, etc. And he and his wife are working with the priest, and they're going through the Freemasonic renunciations. And after the first meeting with this case, his wife says to him, my grandfather was a Freemason, and maybe we should look into that and doing these renunciations. And so he said, yeah, he happened to be at the parish of his exorcist. So the exorcist, sure, let's do them. So they go through our protocol, which is 3 renunciations, once a week for 3 weeks, going to confession, reading these prayers of renunciation. And after the 3rd week, the priest prays a prayer of severing to sever the curses and any effect of the curses. And the woman had walked in. She had really bad rheumatoid arthritis, and she walked in with a cane. And after the final renunciation that they did, and the priest prayed his prayers of severing, she stands up and she says, "You're not going to believe this." And she handed the cane to the priest and says, I don't think I need this anymore." And she walked out. And her husband told me, he said, "Dan, you won't believe it, but I watched in bed every night my wife's toes that looked like this every night for the next 2 weeks and up to a month. They were just straightening out. Same thing with their hands." And so after 30 days, their rheumatoid, the rheumatologist was a Catholic woman, said, "I can't give you an explanation. Whatever you're doing, just do it, because there's no evidence of the arthritis, of the inflammation being there." And so we see arthritis, stomach ailments, and other things as consistent patterns of descendants of Freemasonry. So yeah, there's action items. We put that in items and places for people to go, how to do this to try to find liberation.
What was your favorite, each of you, this is for you separate, what was your favorite question to answer? The one that you just were like, it was the richest to you based on each of your own areas of expertise and passions?
For me, go ahead, Jess.
I think my favorite question or series of questions that I took great delight in answering was the questions that had to do with the strategy or the tactics of spiritual warfare in relation to lay people. And I'll tell you why. When I lived in Southern California, I was part of a deliverance team for 15 years. And so they would try different models over, and California was the hub. They used to have an annual exorcism conference there where they'd find all the exorcists from around the world and have an annual conference at Orange County at the event center there. Huge. I went every year. Father Ripperger flew in there. All the priests from Rome, from the Philippines. I met them all. And so I was part of a team for many years. But I could see, Christine, that a lot of the things that we were doing, and I just kept my mouth shut. You're just a lay person. You're just a cheerleader. The priest is the one that he does the heavy lifting. But in my mind, I'd go back to my Baltimore catechism and say, this priest is praying over this person, but this person, he talked to me on the side, or she did, and they're living in mortal sin. They haven't been to confession. They're not coming to mass on Sunday. Is the priest praying over people that are in mortal sin? That started annoying me, vexing me. So I just started going back to the old Baltimore catechism and looking up the theology of sanctifying grace, mortal sin, occasions of sin, venial sin. And so I started telling the priest that I was working with, and they passed away since they're not here no more. They were good men. They taught at over in Chicago, Illinois, at the Mundelein Seminary. They were instructors. They were graduates from there. They were good men. But there were some basic things that they had forgotten, like the theology of bringing a soul back into sanctifying grace. And so I started mentioning it I moved here to Arizona, and I started mentioning it on radio and on my podcast, on my platform. And I started getting a lot of emails from priests around the country. And they're saying, oh, yeah, you're right, Jess. I need to ask the person to go to confession, make a general confession before I start praying over him. So my favorite questions in the book are those that have to do with lay people, the do's and don'ts for lay people, the authority structure of the church, how to prepare a person, the before care and the after care of a person who's diabolically afflicted. So anything relative to the person and how to bring them back to a life of purity, holiness, and a state of grace, those are my favorite questions in the book.
Yeah. Mine actually are the ones, the questions from priest, which I think is why the book is complementary between Jess and I. Questions to see a priest of the living God come to life, and to see it, a priest learn his dignity and to really start engaging spiritual combat. I've had priests tell me that what Jesse and I are doing on War College has changed their priesthood. They're listening to it. A lot of priests, they're kind of quietly listening. They won't admit it. They can't talk about it, but they're fist pumping, listening to some of our podcasts talking about kind of straight, hard hitting Catholicism. So one of the questions, like for example, a priest was asking me, how do I use minor or just binding prayers as part of my everyday life as a priest? And so Father Jordan Allman in Spiritual Theology, a spiritual giant, great book called Spiritual Theology, he answers that question that a priest can use binding prayers when he suspects nefarious activity in the confessional. And so showing priests how they can use this. I had a priest email me, and he says, you're not going to believe this. I was just doing a little binding prayer because I'm learning from you guys how to do this. And I was doing this binding prayer in the confessional. I would start praying binding prayers before mass. I bind any demon that would try to block the graces that God has in store for anyone who comes to attend Holy Mass today. And he said, people were coming up to me saying, Father, your preaching is on fire. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in your life, but man, you're on fire in your preaching. And he said, I haven't changed anything. I'm just changing the ability of the demon to block the graces through this simple binding prayer. And then in the confessional, binding any demon that would block the memory of those who would come to confess today, and block them, prevent them from making a full and good confession. And he said that you wouldn't believe the quality and the quantity of confessions at my small little parish in the Midwest that are exploding just by using these binding prayers. And so how can a priest, those are the questions that got me most excited to answer and put in here, is questions that come in from parish priests. Those are the real heroes. Jesse and I are just hero support. The real heroes are the parish priests that are slugging it out every day in the trenches of the parish life. And so I wanted to help try to provide a resource for them as well.
That is excellent, because you're both about my age. Well, Dan, I don't know how old you might be, younger than me. Who knows?
Dan's a youngster.
He's a baby. Okay. So, I remember when we were younger that you looked up these priests and the nuns. I was like, oh my gosh. I remember as a kid in a Catholic school, if you saw a nun go into confession, you're like, what? Sister does not sin. Nuns
Right.
can't sin, right? So you had them up there, but you do think that they know everything and they should know more. So we in this generation have come to understand that, yeah, if they didn't learn it in seminary, and because of what happened to the church in the 60s and the infiltration, we know why Satan started blocking them from learning some of these things that you talked about, demonology, angelology, and so on and so forth. So those prayers for our priests, that they may, as you said, Jesse, open up the flow of graces so that they can have an inner knowing, access to the information, how to learn it, this book in their hands. Buy this book for your priest and hand it to him, because this will be very helpful in his toolbox. I have none of this, not none, but you guys have such a huge amount of skill set above me in spiritual warfare. Though the people that come to me in their marriages, I always say I teach spiritual warfare in terms of marriage. And so it's going to be really the last thing. It's very much more self-serving. My question, is there anything in the book about, and before you answer this, I'll give you another caveat about marriage, about people, because we get a lot of people that are divorced and in what I call fake second marriages. Or, I did a video when people said, oh, well, I got married outside the church. And I said, he who owns the language owns the message. You're either married or you're not. So if you had to go outside the church to do this thing, you're not married at all. And so when you were speaking, Jesse, earlier about, these people getting exorcised and yet they're living in mortal sin, it is so, it's such a source of persecution for me when people will say, well, Christine, you're really nice, but some of your opinions, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's not my opinion. We're going with the church. Here's where we are. But I guess it's kind of a question, comment. It's open. Is there anything in there about marriage and how spiritual warfare is blocked by people who are living in a state of mortal sin, in terms of I'm living in fornication, or I'm living with a person who I think I'm married to because I married them civilly, but my covenant spouse is still alive and I'm not in a valid marriage, and no one wants to say that that's a mortal sin, and if you die in that state, you're going to go to hell. It's pretty risky when I do it, but I just have to do it. So the topic of marriage, relationships, divorce, Satan, using that. Either of you have anything on that topic, and is that addressed in the book anywhere?
Here, I'll mention a few things, and then I'll let Dan follow. Number one, there's a study that was done by Dr. David Stoop. He's a psychologist. He writes for Psychology Today. So it's a secular study, but it's well documented. He says couples that pray together at least once a day, okay? At least once a day, that's doable. Somebody says, I can't pray with my wife. Dude, I'm asking you to pray once a day with her. I'm not saying 5 times a day, or the divine office, or once a day. Dr. David Stoop says they reduced their divorce rate by 99%. Huge statistic. I would also say for us as Catholics, it would be a good thing, especially for Catholic men, to start praying for each other. Specifically, there's a beautiful prayer that I pray for my wife every night. It's called the Light of Christ prayer. Dan has it in his book. It was taught to me by Kyle Clement, Father Ripperger. And my wife prays it for me as well. When I prayed over my wife at night, I put my hand on her head because I'm the priest of the home.
Right.
Yeah. And I pray for the light of Christ over my wife every single night, ever since this prayer was taught to me by Dan and Kyle Clement and Father Ripperger. And my wife prays that prayer for me as well. She puts her hands on my heart. At night, she puts her hand on my heart, and she prays the light of Christ prayer over me as well. Remember, the Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 4, that my body belongs to my wife and her body belongs to me. Therefore, we can bless each other's bodies, and we can even bind evil spirits from each other. And so that's something else I think that I would recommend for couples as well. I would also, as a husband and wife, to include what's called a perimeter prayer for the house every night before you go to bed. Or there's different prayers for the house. You got the Sacred Heart Home Enthronement prayer you can do every night. It's just good to enthrone your house every single night to our Lord and our Lady, whether you do it through the Sacred Heart Home Enthronement, the perimeter prayer. There's different prayers out there, but it's a good thing to do that as a couple every night. And the last thing I would say is, remember, as Catholics, make sure you follow your lane. I'm an ex-cop, okay? When people don't follow their lane, we call that drunk driving, and they go to jail, okay? Or you start playing bumper cars on the freeway. A man should know his duties and stay in his lane, which is to lead, protect, and provide for his wife, his family, spiritually and physically. And the wife, she should also stay in her lane. She's the one, based on the on the life of the Blessed Virgin Mary, she is one who surrenders to God and surrenders in so doing to her husband as well. She trusts in God. She trusts also in her husband. And also she receives God's love and she receives her love from her husband. The man is the head of the home. The woman is the heart of the home. When we stay in our lane and interface perfectly, you're tracking towards heaven together as a couple in the domestic church. Dan?
Yeah, I put one of the questions that we covered was a woman who emailed and said, "Hey, my husband needed an exorcism and he needed prayed over, so I made him go to the parish priest, and the priest wouldn't do it. So I went to another priest, and then we had a huge fight on the way. And he didn't want to get prayed over, but he did it anyway. And then the priest prayed over him, and 30 days later, he left me, and now we're in this terrible divorce. And so, stay in your lane is a phrase that we use. You have to stay in your lane of authority. And so when the so I get into this, we get into this in the book. The two ends of the authority structure is provision and protection. And so learning that as a couple. So we go into this in detail in various places in the book, learning the authority structure, because the attack is going to come there. The temptation is always going to be for one in authority that has authority to abdicate, to not engage. That's the sin of Adam, the temptation of Adam, to not engage. But then Eve's temptation, is the one under authority, is always the temptation to usurp. And so learning that right authority and that structure is very, very important. I had a woman come up to me at a parish earlier this year. I was giving a parish mission, and she said, "I just want to come. I wanted to come tell you, you were on another podcast about 5 years ago. It was during COVID or right after COVID, and you were being interviewed, and you talked about the authority structure, and we had never heard of this before. We just, we never heard of the authority structure that you guys were teaching, Father Ripperger and that." And he said, "I want you to know at the time my daughter was 15 and she wanted she was trying to transition to male, and it was just destroying our marriage and destroying our family. And my husband and I happened to listen to this explanation of the authority structure. My brother is a priest. We started putting it into action. And I want to tell you that learning this individual, this particular thing about the authority structure in the home, she said it saved our marriage, and it's probably it's going to save our daughter who's no longer down that path." And so it's critical, and I we weave this into the book on the authority structure, and it might sound like it's dry at times, or like, okay, I get it. But when in practicality, the demon's going to move or not move, he's going to yield or not yield by asking three questions. Does this person have the authority over the person, the place, or the object? If you don't have authority, he doesn't have to yield. He is bound by the law structure that God has established. Number two is, what is the state of grace, of merit? If you're not holy and you're doing binding prayers, if you're in a state of mortal sin, you're going to get taken to the woodshed. And finally, specifically, what are you asking? And so in the book, we kind of cover all three of those things, those three of those elements, and intersperse those throughout the book.
Wow. You're going to think like I'm telling a joke because this is going to make you laugh. But Jesse, when you said this is the first thought that came into my head. You said men say that they don't have time to pray. And I'm like, if your wife said, would you have time to have sex right now? How many men would say, got it? I got all the time you need, right? And yet the prayer. And so if you really put that into perspective, it's like, okay, how much time do you take for each? We're only asking for 1, 2, 3 minutes. Or I should say something that we have to struggle with in my own house. My husband and I were recently talking about picking up our cell phones. Just picking up the cell phone, even if it's just 15 minutes of mindless scrolling. What could you do otherwise with that? And I'm not going to ask you any more questions because I want people to get the book. Are there questions about cell phones and the entry of Satan and stuff? But everybody watching, these are heavy hitters. These are questions that so many want answered, and it's likely the questions you have as well. Remember, the book is called Spiritual Warfare Questions and Q&A, basically. Spiritual Warfare Q&A by Jesse Romero and Dr. Dan Schneider. And it is being offered through TAN Books. And I was make sure, I'm glad I said that right, because I also do shows for people with that other Catholic press. So TAN books. Word, I had this here. Oh yeah, tanbooks.com. Wanted to make sure I said that right. So you can get that book effective now, because if the book's coming out tomorrow, so by the time you see this podcast, no longer do you have to pre-order. You can get that book, get it in your house, and be a little bit more educated then about how to answer those questions when people ask you about what's a big deal about tattoos. My goodness, we see everyone's bodies covered in them. What's the big deal about yoga? And everyone's being made to feel like we are idiots. But you know what? It's not our job. We just kind of pass on the faith. So I'm going to ask you both what I ask everybody as I end my podcast usually is, name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today. I don't care who goes first.
I would say, start the tradition, start the practice of praying at 6 a.m., 12 noon, and 6 p.m. the Angelus. And I'll tell you why. Because I was looking at some of the rabbinic writings, and we all know from the Old Testament that the Jews pray 3 times a day. But rabbis teach that practicing Jews pray at 6 a.m., 12 noon, and at 6 p.m. So what does that mean? Jesus Christ, St. Joseph, Our Lady were practicing Jews. They prayed at 6 a.m., 12 noon, and 6 p.m. Unite your prayers with the Holy Family and start the practice of 6 a.m., 12 noon, 6 p.m. Angelus. That's my advice to everybody.
Yeah, I would add to that. The Angelus is very effective. Um, and it sets the groundwork that the demon responds to the imposition of order as much as to the prayers themselves. The Angelus goes back. It's an ancient prayer, announcing the incarnation of God, the victory of God in humanity. And so adding to that, I would also say prayer, mental prayer, spending time and reading scriptures, Lectio Divina, learn your Catholic faith, read the spiritual writers of the church, read the saints, the doctors of the church, read their writings, do mental prayer, because ultimately a Catholic definition of discernment is knowing clean from unclean. And we're talking about all the questions that are coming in. What is clean, unclean sex? What is clean, unclean thinking? Clean, unclean speech? Clean from unclean associations like Freemasonry, clean from unclean exercise. Is yoga clean or unclean? And you're not going to do that simply by an intellectual endeavor, but learning through prayer to discern and shut, as you said, Christina, shutting that stupid phone off and trying to spend more time in prayer. Do as I say and not as I do, because it's so hard in this modern world. But spending more time in mental prayer, spending more time in the discipline of prayer, set times of prayer, doing the ancient prescriptions of prayers, Eucharistic adoration, fasting, tapping into those old traditions. We fight an ancient enemy, and the ancient weapons we find are the best.
Mm. Well, I've enjoyed doing the show. I could have done it with Jesse and Dan separately, but I wanted them together because their energy is just great. And you actually, I want to kind of market them. You can listen to them every Wednesday. They have a podcast together called Guys War College, if I'm correct, right? And that's Wednesdays from 9 to 10 Pacific. Is
Yes,
that on Virgin
correct.
Most Powerful Radio?
Yes, correct.
Excellent. And Jesse, you've got some other shows there, Jesse 909 Terry and Jesse Show. We can find that. You can get information on all of that at jesseromero.com.
Correct.
And Dan, you said just to go ahead and point to Liber Christo Institute.
Christo.com and jesseromero.com. Yeah.
And then there, again, can you quick tell people who are just seeing who you are for the first time, what is Liber Christo Institute?
Liber Christo works with it's a group we started associated with Father Chad Ripperger to do training and consultation for priests and exorcists and lay people that are working with them at the parish and pastoral level. So we train priests and exorcists with a safe use and a safe traditional way of doing deliverance and exorcism in the church.
So you guys go there as well. Jesse, you used to be on YouTube before the bad guys, got you kicked off now that we got a new president and somehow.
No, I'm back on. Yeah.
Just going to ask you, are you back on YouTube?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can find him there, but I'm going to put links to where you can find these guys in the show notes. So you won't have, if you're driving, you'll be able to find it there. And again, don't worry about me saying you guys, because I'm from Wisconsin and that is technically good English in Wisconsin. So
You betcha.
You betcha. That's right. That's right. Okay, I think I've got everything down that I wanted to make sure to say. Share this show with your friends. I'm on all the social media places. Send them, no matter what social media place you're on, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever. Share this with people of all generations, because the youngins need to know. The old guys think we know it all, and we need to know some of these things as well. Follow me on my website, breakfastwithbacon.com, and you can get a lot of these shows there as well. And I think that's all the things that I had to say. So, guys, you ready? Remember how to do this? I
Yep.
tested them before we got off to see they remembered. So I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life. Can you guys say it?
Sunny side up.
They did it.